Welcome, everybody, to building your first TypeScript project with React and Node. Today, we're going to continue our TypeScript beginner series by not only looking at what we built in the past, our Node backend, but also how to use TypeScript and React together. So right after this short introduction, we'll get into it. I love that intro music. Lucas, it looked like you're having some headphones issues, so maybe you didn't get the full music experience as everyone else did in the audience. But hope you can hear me and hear us as well.
Yes, we
Cool.
definitely can hear you.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining in today's TypeScript session or TypeScript for beginners. Let me go ahead and see here. Gonna show our little presentation on our faces that you can see here. So this is actually part 3 of our TypeScript for Beginners series. So I'm very curious, one, to see where everyone is joining from. I see a few people already there, but also I want to know if this is your first time joining us. So, or if you've been to any of these other workshops before. So we started out with the TypeScript or getting started with TypeScript session. It was just little old me by myself, kind of going through some of the basics of TypeScript. I didn't cover some advanced topics. We'll probably save that on for later. But then we also then I was joined by Lucas for the first time for building your first TypeScript project, where we actually built the back end of the application and the project that we're going to talk about. So let us know where you're joining from and if you've been to any of these sessions, because I'm always very much interested in that. So let's see what we have. We have some few first timers. Let me see here. Go here. So we have Panjak first time in the UK. Thank you. Other sessions, I had no idea. Well, now you know. We have 2 other sessions, and even if you haven't joined that session before, I will go into more detail what we covered last time. So some first timer from Berlin, first timer from New York. Okay, so a lot of first timers. That's good. As you can see on the agenda today, what we actually will do is cover some of that last episode, if you will. So this is going to be like your, if you didn't catch the last season Netflix type of delivery, where we do also cover some of that stuff. Then Lucas, who actually built our backend, he's been busy. He had some pet problems, but he saw not only did he solve those problems, but he also built a new route or new additions to the backend project that we covered in the last session. And then also we'll then cover the React portion that I built and see how that's going to be working. So I see a lot of first timers. So again, if you want to go ahead and look at those other sessions, they're going to be really helpful for the context of what we're doing here. But we also, again, this session won't be only about what we did last time, so we'll to stick around here. But yeah, love to see all the first timers from basically around the world. We have South Africa to Texas. I grew up in Texas, so nice to see a friendly face. And all the way to Toronto. Nice, good diversity of audience here. I love it. Cool. So, well, without further ado, then we will also be sharing a lot of information to you, links, code, stuff like that. And that's going to all be available at this link here, aka.ms/tslinks. So you'll get the links that we share as far as other resources that we help us build these projects, any other resources that might be helpful, and then actually the repos or the code that we will be showing you, which is always good to stick around and find out where that is later on. So don't feel free to be stressed and trying to like copy and paste the code as we go on, because that's going to take a lot of time. Cool. So I'll keep that link up there, and I'll show it throughout the session as well, so you can find it later on. So this won't be an introduction to Node or React. So if this is your first time seeing React or Node code, I would recommend that you check out these other two kind of Microsoft Learn modules. They're completely free. All it does is take time. You can see how long the time it takes. So 20 minutes for a Node.js and 30 minutes for React. These won't be specific to TypeScript, but some of the concepts that we're going to cover today, you'll probably need to know those things before you go into the actual TypeScript working with it. So it's a good way to start out. Again, if you're very beginner in both of these frameworks or libraries, it's going to be a great start there. And then you can kind of level up with the TypeScript stuff. So does anyone remember what we talked about last time? And given that there's so many first timers, I'm going to go ahead and say, no, you don't, which is okay. Basically, we were building a project, and I won't bore you with the entire story from last time. But I don't like waiting for the subway here or the train for public transit. So we built an application, or what we did last time was the back end of this application that allows us to see the train times here in Stockholm in real time. So not just Google Maps or finding what the schedule is like or what it happens, but actually where the trains are now, where the status. So if I went to a station, how it works here in Stockholm, there's big boards that say 3 minutes now, 2 minutes. Basically, we're getting all that information from a public API, and we're gonna. I'll have Lucas here kind of walk us through what he built and also the additions to he built, and then we'll go into the specifics of the React front end as well. So Lucas, I guess if you could do like I said, recap of what we did last time, since we have a lot of new timers, and then also kind of what you built, what's new to the application there. I'm going to go ahead and switch to your screen now.
Sure thing. So
you might have to zoom in a bit.
Yeah. Let me increase a bit this so you can all see it. Let me look at the here. I guess it's useful now. So, well, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Lucas. If you don't know me, I left a comment there in the chat. I also have a YouTube channel. I'm a developer for like 10 or 12 years now. I work at Klarna here in Stockholm. And we've been teaching TypeScript for you in the past 2 sessions, I guess. And in the past session, what we did, the link is in my social networks, but also here in the Microsoft events website. So what we did last time was that we built this whole API from scratch. So basically what this API is just Express API. So if you're not familiar with Express today, Express is basically a framework, right? It's one of the most famous, actually is the most famous web framework for Node in what we do. So basically everyone uses it. And what we did last time was that we created this guy over here. So we created an API and endpoint called times.stationID. So basically you can create everything using JavaScript, but why would we want to create something that's not typed if we can create something that is actually typed and can help us a lot? So what I showed was that how we can create this get endpoint with all these async routes and stuff, how we can validate our object that comes in using Zod, which is a validation library for TypeScript in general. So it provides types and a lot of other things. So it's pretty amazing. And then how we can parse this schema and call that external API that we were doing, which is called Traffic Labs, by the way. And then we just return that information to us. So if I have everything set up here, I just started the API. So you cannot see this because, well, it's too small, but it says server started. And I am going to go to one of the stations here. Let me go to times and put this, right? So what we have, let me see if I can increase. Nice. I think it will be useful. So we have a station ID that is basically a number. And this station ID we get from the other endpoint that I'm going to show you today. And if you watch the other series, like the other video that we did, I just hard-coded one of those because I went out looking for those station IDs, and I just used one of those. 1070 is another one. So you can see that it returns for us. Let me reduce a bit so I can see everything. I hope you can see on the other side. If you're not being able to see it,
let us know if
tell
you
me.
can't see it.
So you can see that we have buses that go from here. So the bus line 57, it's going from it's going to the destination Sofia. It's going to stop at this place, and there is the number of this place if we want to put in other APIs that they have. And this is the detail time when it's going to go. So it's already passed. It's expected to be here actually now. So 14, which is another time, and the display time is new, which is now. And basically, this is how we take a look on this. And deviations are like anything that can happen, like if something is delayed or anything else. So we can have also the name of the bus, like if it's a blue bus or if it's not a blue bus, which is the group red that we have here as well. So, well, this is one of the APIs, so I can do other things. But what if I want to, change this station number? I really need to get the number from another API. So that's what I did. Damn. So that was what I did to show you today. Let me see here. Now I think it's able to see it. So I'm just going through all the APIs. I'm not going to show you how we code this thing because this is not the talk to do this. I did this in the last talk. It's basically the same thing. In the end of it, I invited you to complete this challenge, which is to add this new route. So if you did on your home after watching this, congratulations. If you did not, try to go to the repository, which is the link down below, and try to add this by yourself as well. So it's in my repository over there in my GitHub account. So you can see it right there. I will share with you the name of the repository in GitHub as well. So you can go there after I after I show this to you. So what I did here was that I'm creating a new endpoint called /stations, and this is going to receive another route handler, but this time I am typing it very thoroughly. I could have done this here as well on the rec, but I didn't, just to show that we can use the non-typed ones. So if you go and hover your mouse, you're going to see that it's a request, and this request takes parameters. These parameters, like the first one, is the station ID. That's the one that comes here, right? And all the rest of the parameters are any, which means that they're not typed at all, right? So basically, we can type both the params, the body, and everything, and also the response. So basically, the request here is going to be typed as never, which is a type that we say, hey, this type doesn't exist. It's never going to be executed. So we don't have any parameters here. So it's never. The body is also never because it's a GET request. The query will be a queue, which is the query that we're going to send. So basically, our endpoint is going to be /stations where queue is equal to whatever here, right? And then we are going to just pass this on to our schema over here. And I implemented some station cache that I'm going to talk about in a bit. But and then we just call the API. You can see that we have an API URL and we have a stock lookup API key that we did on the app config file. If I open the app config file here, you're going to see that we have now the stop lookup API key, which comes from this environment variable, right? So in order to make it a bit faster, because station names don't currently change a lot, like it takes a real long time for them to change. So why do we need to go to the API every time, right? So why not just cache what we have? So I created this station cache. And as you can see, it's not only an array. I'm using a structure in JavaScript that's called a map. So a map accepts two parameters. One of them is a string, which is the key. It must always be either a string, a number, or a symbol. And a stop response is the interface that's going to be responded from that API that we are going to call. So the stop response here is basically a status code, a message, an execution time, and the response data for that station specifically saying. So we have X, Y coordinates and the products, which means that buses, metro, and whatever that they have over there. And then I store this in the cache. If the cache already has the station that I'm looking for, then I just return it. I don't need to basically go to this API, call everything, and so on. So this is a caching strategy, a very, very simple one, because if I refresh, like if I turn off my app and turn on again, I'm going to lose all my cache. But the correct way to approach this would be to have like a Redis or another database that we call in-memory databases like Memcache, Varnish, or whatever other cache-based database that you can do, and store this there. And then you can turn off and decouple your application from your cache. So this is a bit of an architectural visual, but for what we're doing, it's completely worth it. And you don't need to have another dependency here. So you can just spin it up. And as long as you have this running, your cache is going to run. And if it doesn't have the cache, like if the cache doesn't exist, we're going to set this in the cache. So we're going to add that in the cache. I could also implement like a timeout, but I don't think it's kind of worth it. But it's a challenge for you. Try to implement a timeout like 5 minutes or 10 minutes where this data will expire and you need to add it again. So if the cache is set, and then we just send it back the way we got it, right? I also extracted, if you look at the first version of this in the GitHub, I'm not going to show you this because I just have like a few minutes. We have the error treatment here, right? So we do cache and the error treatment goes here. But I needed to like duplicate this to do here, right? And duplicating code is never good. So what I did was that I created a middleware. So it's a function that's going to run if the other function doesn't run properly. So this is what the next is for. So imagine a list of functions, and one of our routes is one of these functions. And the next function is what we call the error handler. So the error handler receives this error here. And it's going to be to this parameter, which needs to be typed on as any, because we don't know what kind of error this is. We could put this as an unknown, which is also valid. It's even more valid than the others, because then we know that the error is from a type that we don't know. And then we do what we call the type narrowing to say, hey, this error is an instance of a Zod error. And if it is, we just return this. I'm not using the other cases, right? But you could check for other cases as well. So let's see how this ends up. And I can just click here, and we have a station, right? So I'm going to use like Udenplan, which is a station here. But I could also use, let's say, Toriet, which is another station that we have. And then, as you can see, it took 86 milliseconds because it's not in the cache. But if I call it again, it takes 3 milliseconds because now it's in the cache. It doesn't need to go to the API. And I'm pointing to the camera, but I'm not being showed. So I'm just doing like a lot of things. I forgot about this.
Point again for the people who can see your pointing skills.
Yeah, so if this is not in the cache, as you can see here, my finger, and now it's in the cache, it takes 3 seconds. I like to gesticulate a lot. As you can see, we have the Toriet station, which is the station here in Stockholm. This is what we want to be. So I can take this site ID 9119. I can go back to the times, and then I can put this here. And you can see that Toriet has a metro, which is the Tunnelbana, that's living now. And the destination is Åkershov. I think this is the way we pronounce, because my Swedish is not the best. But this is what the time is expected to go. Right, so our application works. We have caching. We have all the things that we need for it to make it work. And it's a very nice API, a very cool API to use. So this is my cue to leave. But if I need to, like, if I wanted to put a challenge to you, and if you want to, continue to improve this, try to implement the cache. Try to implement a typed cache with an expiration date. So it's a bit more complicated, right? So, Korey, that's now with you. How you integrate this in the front end now?
Oh, the challenge is mine. I choose to accept. But cool. Let's see. Does anyone have any more questions around the backend and Node? We got one, which is the classic question anytime you show a new VS Code theme. But What VS Code theme are you using? It looks so well with Node.
Let me see. My theme is called Bearded Theme. Bearded Theme, it's the vivid purple. So it's a bunch of themes. It's a set of themes. It's a vivid purple. I used to use another one called Dracula, which is pretty famous. And yeah, now I'm using the purple one.
Got it. Well, now you know, Travis. But cool. While we see if there's any other questions for the back end side of things, yeah, I did want to point everyone. So this is the page where all the links are that I've been kind of showing in the chat. So we'll have the recording here as well as the React and Get Started for Node modules, and then the backend repo. And I think I messed up, but I should have just made it on your repo or branch on your repo, but I forked that repo and made it a front end branch where the front end code is. So that'll be another little challenge for everyone to kind of put things together. And then we're going to talk about interfaces quite a bit coming up here in the React portion. So if you're not familiar with that as well, we have another module, interfaces with TypeScript, or in TypeScript to do that. And then I'm going to show you some other cheat sheets and other tools for these things. Cool. Yeah, bearded thing. I'm going to put that on there so everyone knows. Shout out to whoever made the bearded theme. Set. Nice. Cool. All right. So I hope you're ready to learn some React. So the typical React setup, I use create React app. You might use Vite or Vite. With Vite, I know that there is a way you can just choose a TypeScript project. I'm going to go ahead and use create React app here because it's probably the most popular way, or the most way that people are used to these sorts of things. So don't slam me. I know it comes with some unnecessary things, and then you might not actually use, but I think it's a good way to do that. How we actually do that with with React is we do this npx create React app, my app. So it will look similar to what you would do for a normal React app, but then you use this template TypeScript. So the TypeScript support is already built into create React app, which is great. And you get very different or similar files to what you would get in the create React app, but instead you actually get their kind of TypeScript cousins, brothers, sisters, I don't know, siblings, where we have basically, if I go here and close all of these there, and let me go ahead and zoom this in a little bit for you. You'll see that I have this, if I go to my public, instead of TSX or JS file, sorry, I have this TXX files as well. So these are all kind of the TypeScript versions of your file. So it really helps save that time. So again, it would be very, again, it has some native support within TypeScript on that side of things, which is great. Cool. Let me go ahead. I'm just going to, where are we at? I always forget to zoom in here. So let me see if you can see that code, so I don't strain anyone's eyes while we do this. That should be big enough, yeah? Hope so. Cool. So after we've done that, we get, like I said, all of the TSX equivalents of these files. So I don't have to do that now for that, since I've already created an app. And then I have a few kind of things that are tricky when you're connecting Node and React, specifically with like a project like this. So maybe, again, if you're kind of working alone or on a hobby project, there's some kind of things that maybe will throw you for a loop, or make some errors or things that are kind of annoying. And the first thing I would say is to check the root dir, so the root directory in the tsconfig of your Node project. So let me just show you what I mean by that. If I go to the tsconfig here, what happens is if I go to like the out directory, as well as the root directory, and we talked about this in the last session as well. Basically, these are the where you output or the input of your files for when TypeScript is getting compiled. And I think this is maybe also unique to VS Code, but if you are using a different file structure than maybe what I'm doing here, you might actually pull in some of these things where you can also go in and, if you have errors in your backend file, your front end, they can be separate when you compile them. And this makes it much easier. So just making sure that you have this actually pointing to the right file is a way where you can also, save some time and frustration when you're doing these things. Cool. The other one that I want to point out to you is also enabling cores on your backend. So we will be doing this in localhost. So if anyone's kind of worked with APIs before, the cores error or like the CrossOrigin reference, I forget what the S is. So please let me know in the chat if you know the exact thing. And Lucas, I'm sure you're very, the S. Basically, it's disabling you from making these references across the origins of or different domains. So by default, this is disabled, and it will make some errors in your actual code when you want to make a request to another domain. And in that case, you'll need to make changes to that. So in that way, I think it's where did I do this? In your either your app.js or in your app API.js, I've just gone on and I've made a CORS request where I can do it any domain. So here, so this app.use, CrossOrigin resource sharing. Thank you, Fashion Medium. I've seen you before, so welcome back. So this is basically allowing me to just do this in any domain. I'm not sure, I don't know if this is like an actual production project, you don't want to do this. But just for our cases, I just made this simple and simplified there. So, and if I go the last one, so I've made that. So again, you can change that on the backend, and it makes your life much easier when you're making those requests. The next thing I'll do is you want to understand the API shape. What I mean by that is what's kind of unique to working with TypeScript is we use things like called interfaces to basically, or interfaces, or you can make it a type, where we're actually going to understand what the shape or the response of that API request in the case so that we know the expected types of that response. And I kind of make it seem like you're sort of building your own documentation within your application because it really saves a lot of headache when you're maybe working with an unknown API. You can see in your code exactly how that API works and what to sort of expect. So I looked at a lot of examples that you might see out there on the internet. Normally works with very simple APIs. So like the classic to-do API or something like the users API where it's the placeholder JSON, and they normally have like one or two fields of those things. So it's much easier to build an interface for those because you basically only expect maybe one or two responses. In this API, it's much different because it's a lot more complex. There are a lot of things going on. So if I actually did that, if I went to this Thunder client, which Lucas just showed you, if I go to this and I'm going to actually make a request here, you can see here, we have this like station ID, results. So all of these things here, and then it actually gets pretty deep, right? So metros, the group line, display time, and I have to actually basically build an interface to sort of know what these results are and expect those types. So it could be really tricky to do this on your own, and you would probably make a lot of mistakes just because different data types change and things like that. So what I actually discovered in my kind of searching on making this much easier for everyone is this tool here, and that's linked to the page. It's called Transform Tool JSON to TypeScript. And essentially what you can do is you can go in and copy and paste the JSON file, so this here, and then actually build an interface for you that is exactly correct to not only what the types are, so you can see here the expected type. And again, we covered some of these basics in the earlier sessions. So this is like data age, expected number. it builds it all for you, and it names, you know, this to root. So I went ahead and changed this. But this makes it a lot easier, and also no room for errors or mistakes for building the shapes, or right, the expected way that this response would look like in the front end side of things. So once I make a request from the API on the back end, which is this JSON here, basically I need to build an interface that kind of expects those types. And that's critical when we start to use these sorts of things in our front end applications, especially with React. So that's the first thing. So I have this interface here, which I call display time. The two main things is station ID and number, but these are actually, if I hover over them, like results is actually an interface inside the interface. So another nice thing within working with TypeScript is you can extend interfaces, and that just goes in, and now we know we have like a metro that's expecting an array. So these are all building essentially the shape of the API, so you can expect what the expected types and the values of those things. So the next thing we need to do after we've built the shape of the API is actually make the request, right? So we built an interface, the types, like I just showed you, is actually, and the JSON to TypeScript tool is really great. We want to make our first component that will actually take in the request. So if we go ahead and look at that, there's a couple of ways that you can actually make a React TypeScript friendly component. I preferably like to do it in this format, where I have this interface, which is station ID, and the station ID, which is a string. And what is this actually meaning here? Is that when we work with React, we work with properties, right? So you normally pass properties into your in your component to be managed, to handle, to doing transformation of that data, all, and then you can return it later on. So there's a couple ways you can define components within React and TypeScript. I like this way. So this is how I do it. So I'm taking this const, so this is a functional component. It's going to take in the parameter or the property or the props of station ID. And what is the type? So again, what is the expectation, or what's the type that we're defining here is station ID. So that is taking that, and then we know this is a string, and you can also hover over, giving the IDE some of that IntelliSense or that intelligence from using TypeScript right in there in the IDE. So now I know this should be a string, and later on when I'm working with this with the API, I can I'll get, TypeScript will kind of point to it if it's not the correct type. There's another another way you can do this, which is through here, this const react.fc, and then props. So props would be a property that I define, and then I'm passing it to the station ID. Again, this is a point of preference. I think I heard, and don't quote me on this, that this react.fc might not be supported in newer versions of React, but it currently works, and it's fine. But I kind of like this way because, one, this is this is TypeScript. Like, I know what this looks like, and this is also very much React and TypeScript. Where this kind of react.fc is something, I don't know. It just seems so different to me than what I would normally type. So I don't normally do with this, but that's another way you can do it, and you'll probably see that also using other resources when you're learning. So the other thing now we can do is actually use this sort of React hook, React hooks, as far as either use state or use reducer. In this case, we're going to use state to actually take in a type. So in this case, what is the type? It's this interface display time, and that is exactly what we built here, right? This interface display time. So that is going to be the expected type that we have, use state. And then we have this other thing here, which is a union, basically meaning or null. And I think Lucas had mentioned earlier as well in his the back end, he also has some null, because in this case, when we start out not making a request, this will not be an actual value. So we need to have this null as well to support this API request. And then, like it is when you do a in normal React, you also need to make an initial state of this, and that's going to be turned to null as well. So this is kind of, if you're also doing this maybe in a different request or different data type, you could do like empty strings or something like that, maybe that's what you're used to, but we need to have a value here. And then the next step is actually getting the times, right, to actually make the request. So I have this function, which is going to actually make the API request. And I use fetch here. You can use Axios. It's going to work very similar. But I use this because I don't want to show you importing other libraries. And then I want to do basically make this function, and it's going to return something, or it's actually going to be a promise. So this is built in to the sort of React TypeScript experience, if you will. And what is the promise? What should it return after the promise is fulfilled, if you will, is the display time. So again, we have this use state, and it's all being driven by this interface of when the actual response is going to look like. And then I have this, just the URL, which is the URL here, and then the station ID, again, bringing that to the interface I defined, and I'm passing it as a property. Then it's actually going to be very similar to React or normal JavaScript here. The fetch, so we got the URL, we got a little then in catch here, so we're going to take the response, correct the JSON, catch if there's any errors, and I have this error instance of, and then I have a type error. So there's actually a specific type of error that I would like to have there. And then lastly, once we actually get the data, we're going to take this data as, so this as keyword here, the display time. So again, the interfaces are very important when you're especially working with APIs and React and TypeScript, because that's literally really going to be helping you maintain the type of your API response, and then also show that on there. And then I'm going to do this use effect. So use effect, as it is in React, when the component is sort of loaded, we're going to then get the times. So run that function, take the item, and then actually set that. So set the state, the new state, to the item that we have, and then pass that into our station ID, that array there. Then I have this just to kind of clean up the user interface. If we don't have any data, so if we don't have any actual response there, we're going to go ahead and just have this div here that this says data is loading until we actually make the first request. Now, when I want to actually handle the request or the response of the API, I need to also return, just like I would some JSX, that actually shows that data. So this is, again, a very tricky API because it's, I won't say tricky, but it's complex, at least as far as finding exactly the results that you want to show the user. And in this case, I'm using the actual stops and then the times that the train will actually reach that stop. And so in the cases of working with this JavaScript, you can probably get away with certain, if the properties aren't the right, or you don't select the right type there, or the right response within the data, then it could be okay. You could get away with that, and maybe it just shows the wrong data. With TypeScript, you want to be very specific about what data that you want to have to show, because then it also manages the type. So another kind of handy tool I want to show everyone, because I get kind of caught up, I don't know about everyone else, caught up sometimes in finding if I'm working with like some complex JSON. So I have this JSON Pathfinder, and we can go here and here. And basically, if I want to, I can go in and I think I still have the response here. So yeah, so this is, again, the API response that we would get back from the backend. And if I want to, so at station ID, that's pretty basic, right? So it's just, whatever it is, station ID. But if let's say I want to get the metros, I want to get the first 3 responses. So that's what I did here, because that's what we have exactly there. And then I want to go ahead and let's say I want to get display time. So I can see here results. So the first value in the array of metro time, and then the actual displays. So again, it makes it kind of easy again when you're working with, I guess, deeper is the word, APIs, whether the JSON is not just 2 fields or something like that. And it's really important, again, when you're working with TypeScript, because I'll show you later on, I need to make these sorts of data points also what we call optional. So this is that code handling here. So I have a H1 with the destination, and I have these data. So again, that's also in the display time interface. Results, so the results array that's within there. And then the first array element here, metros, and then destination. And I have these optional, these question marks. Again, that's something we covered in the last session. Because in cases of when these aren't available, then we need to make sure that the code or that the types here are still flexible. So this is kind of a one way you can do this. Again, this is me doing it myself on the style that I want. There's probably other implementations you can do on this side of things, but just to kind of make things simple here. That's, again, taking all of the responses in the interface, display time, and showing them within there. So I take the first three responses there. Cool. We have a question. So to try to clone the repo and npm start after npm I doesn't run. So feel free when we have the, if you want on that main page that I have for the links, I'll have to look at that specifically, but this TS links, if you have any questions or get any errors, put it there, or you can make a comment on the repo as well, and I'm happy to look at it. And like I said, sometimes these errors come because of TS configs or things like that, so really important. So let's see what we covered already in here. So we've already done displaying the time, which is important, but now we actually want to actually get the input from the user. So we want the user to tell us what station that they're actually interested in. And here I did this in this get station. So very similar to the other functional component, I have this type station props instead of an interface. These are what we talked about last time, can be interchangeable depending on what your needs are. And I have what's really cool about types is you can actually import functions in those types, not just fields or variables. So I have this function on submit that gets passed in this station ID. So again, we're going to work with the station ID that the user has inputted. And again, we'll have this type string. The station ID might be confusing when you look at this because station ID looks like numbers, but I don't want to assign this a number because in the actual API request, it is in fact the string that gets sent through to the request. So I want to keep that into the string. And then this void really just means that the function doesn't really return anything in this case. So I have this const now functional component get station, and I'm going to use, again, passing that station props. So the properties are there on submit, and that's going to be of type station props. And again, I could see here, if I hover over there, that's what we are expecting right in there. And then I'm also going to have, again, very similar to what you would normally do in React, a station ID, set station ID. So these sorts of things there. And then the use state will now be expected as type string, and the initial value will be nothing. So last time I used null because that's taking the API request, and I need to have something there. In this case, since this is going to be the input, so the box that basically the users are going to put in the station ID, this is going to be a blank empty string. Next, I'm going to do, I'm going to actually handle submit. So this is very similar to what we have in React. So you want to do some event handlers. And I'll have this handle submit and an event. But what is new, and what's probably if you haven't worked with React and TypeScript before, is that React actually has types of different events within React. So I have here this form event, which is one, as the name says, it's connected to an actual form event there, and I pass it in the type or expected type HTML form element. And there's quite a few of these. So instead of trying to remember them, there's a site called React TypeScript Cheat Sheets, which is also linked on the main page. And that's going to be super helpful for you when you want to look at the things. So there's the hooks, like the use state. And then also if I go to form and events, if I scroll down on this page, you can go ahead and see the different types of events that we have built into different event types for you to track on your event handlers. So I have form event, and I'm also going to use this change event, which is anytime the change value of input or select happens. So I have an input text box, and I want to respond to that event. So that's handling there. And then preventing default is basically just to avoid the whole page reloading once the form is submitted. And then if it's a type of station ID, I just have this to check that this is actually going to be a string and not something else, so that we can kind of keep that concise and no errors up chain when you make the request for the API. So that's whether that is all handled in handle submit. And then the other one that we want to do is handle change, right? So once the actual change in the input happens, and that is through, again, now we have this React change event. We had React form event first, and then we do the input element. So the form element, so the input box that we will make. And then we're going to take this new value, the value that's within the input box, to take the target of that, and then we're going to set station ID to that new value. So again, right here, this use state that we kind of normally would do that there for that. So one question, typing the event is exactly the kind of thing which seems unnecessary about TS. I love it. It can be complicated when you first look at that and like, why do I need to do all of these sorts of things? But again, especially if this is going to be a very simple UI. But if you have a very complex UI and handling those tracks of the actual change events is going to be really important for, let's say if you have, again, you're asking for multiple inputs and you want to make sure that you're returning the right type. So again, React and TypeScript specifically gives you a lot of benefits, especially when you're working with more complexity projects. And I think we tried to do a middle ground here of having also, a medium complex project to help you guys get all started. So now we're going to actually return these things. So we're going to have the input here. So basically doing the same thing that you would do in React. So on submit, that's going to get past the on handle submit. And you can see here now this is saying react.form event is what that specific type is. And I have a placeholder, which is the enter station ID. And the value is either going to be a station ID or nothing at the moment. And then the on change event is going to be used with the handle change method that we made. So very similar to what you would see in your normal React applications. And then I just have a button to look up that station. So lastly, we obviously need to tie all of this together, right? We do that much like you would in a normal React application within the app.tsx, so not your JS, but your TSX file. And we can do this, again, we're going to do a new set state now with the set station ID. And then we're going to have this as a string. And then we're also going to make a new method, which is the handle submit, which is going to set your station ID to the station ID that gets passed between the child components. And that's going to be a string. So keeping that very consistent with throughout the application is, again, another advantage of using TypeScript because, let's say if I had this a number and I was trying to pass this to the child component, that's going to cause errors. And, again, if we have multiple components and have a more complex project, it could take hours for me to find out where in the chain that this issue is. And even if, in normal React or JavaScript, it might work, but it doesn't actually work the way you're intending to. So then lastly, before we actually show the application, we're going to have this get station. So on submit, it's going to get past the method here, handle submit, which is going to pass through this property, station ID. This is what we want. And then the display time is going to, again, assign the station ID to the station ID that we currently have, which is handled through the actual input. So that is this application kind of in a nutshell. So let's see if it's working. One thing I would say when you are doing this yourself is sometimes, and this is not on the back end, but this is a free API, and sometimes the API either gets rate limited or just doesn't respond with anything. So I always try to like check you're either using a Thunder client or Postman or whatever, just to make sure that I actually get a response before I test the front end. Because if there's no response, the front end will show us nothing as well. So if we go to this, so this is again a very simple, and let me zoom in here so you can see, very simple API front end, which is just a input box, because this is not a CSS course. And if it was a CSS course and I'm teaching it, it would be a very sad CSS course. But if I go in and I go to 91117, so this is a station ID that we know that was working, and I go ahead and look that up. Now it's going to make a request to the backend, and then go in and get us to train number 1. So this is to the like final destination of a train. And new, if you remember from last time, new is now in Swedish. So this is actually, the train is actually arriving now here at the station 9117. Then we also have a train 2, which is some insider knowledge here is going the opposite direction, and that's something we can also get from the API. It's a direction, which I think the API shows like 1 or 2, so that also showing that. And then this train is arriving at 2 minutes. So again, it's all working, and we can do another request and find it's going to ping the backend if it's working. We'll see. I think the backend might have crept out on us of the API, but this is also going to show those as well. So that's one way. That's another way, again, to kind of connect the backend and the front end with all of these parameters. One thing I didn't implement, and let's see if maybe 9115 is not an actual thing I didn't implement here, is actually getting the lookup. So we have to type in the station ID here, and Lucas has implemented a new route that actually gives us the station name, and that's probably a better user experience as far as instead of knowing the station ID. So that's kind of giving you a little project to continue on with this. So that actually, instead of doing the API request to directly do this 9117, go ahead and ping that to the location or station lookup, and then go ahead and return that later on, so that the user just types in the station ID that they want. Makes it much easier. That's a little carrot, a little thing that you can work on, and feel free to ping us any questions if that doesn't work out. Cool. So I'll take some questions now. Are you constantly checking the default types when writing the code? So no, and I know what you mean. So this is actually, if I go to the get station or display times here, essentially I'm making this question mark is like an optional statement. So what essentially this is if this doesn't come back or this isn't returned, it doesn't necessarily throw an error on the side. So if I were to change this, because basically what I have at the top is this display time could be display time on or null, and if it's null, then this actually won't return this specific data type. So what I do is have this as an optional field so that this doesn't throw me any errors later on. I think there's probably other ways you can implement this. This is the way I've done it, but again, it's another kind of thing with TypeScript that not only is it strict at times, it can offer you some flexibility. So there you go. What jersey is that, Korey? Yes, good question. So I am. This is completely irrelevant, but thank you, GPS, for joining. I'm an Arsenal fan, so Arsenal playing later today, big match. If you're watching this in the future, you will already know what the result is. But Arsenal versus Man City, number 1, number 2 in the Premier League. Cool. But yeah, any questions? I'll bring Lucas back, and we'll see if you have any questions both on the TypeScript side, working with Node, React side as well. We can take a few more questions, and I'll put this yay gunners on there while we wait.
I have also a nice thing that I can show you
Oh, we like nice things.
about that type tool that you mentioned. So let me present my screen here with you here. So password. So if you said that we open like the times here, right? So if I, oh, obviously nothing is running. So if I
Zoom in as well.
can
Yeah.
see, zoom in a bit. So if I do this, right, I get the types, and then you use that external tool, right? This is Thunder Client. What you can do, you can go here to the left side on the right side. Can you see my screencast mode? Can you see like I don't see my cursor on this, but you can go to the right side here, and you can get the types as well at the same. The only difference from that one to the one that you're using is that it's a bit more dumb, but it generates more types because it gets like every enum and everything. So you can actually generate it without leaving the code. And then you can just copy this and you go here in your config and then you paste it up. And then you have everything in the type. So it's pretty nice to be able to generate this naturally in Visual Studio Code.
Nice. Yeah, I actually never used Thunder Client until you showed in the last demo. So I was like, oh, let me. So I don't know all.
I use it all, and it's pretty nice. Like if you're doing more like advanced things, I really would recommend like Insomnia or stuff. But Thunder Client really do wonders.
Yeah, I've always been a Postman person, but now having it right in the VS Code is so nice, and it's very lightweight. So Thunder Client, that's another shout. Cool. We have suggesting. So Crypto Uni, I really love your style because you have suggested so many things that we should be doing or that you want to do. And I like this one. I particularly like this one. All the other ones I'm not the biggest fan, but make Lucas redo the entire backend in Rust. Should take 5 minutes tops.
Damn. Yeah, I would definitely do this if I knew how to code Rust. This is in my learning list. I really want to. You suggested about Dino. Dino is something that we might actually do. It's something that I really like. I really like Dino. I really like how it creates an environment for TypeScript, and you can run this without the needing of building anything. So it's pretty amazing. And you can actually use more, more APIs. So one of you can see my GitHub. I have a few projects that I use Dino a lot, especially for like creating images and stuff, since I can use like web APIs like Canvas and stuff like that on Dino without installing anything external. So it's pretty amazing what we can do with Dino, and I think Dino is something that we should definitely look at. They say, oh, Dino is the node killer, but no, I don't think it's going to happen.
Wasn't Bun? I remember Bun. I don't know if that's still a thing.
Yeah, everything is the node killer now. Like Bun is very in the beginning of the like, I would say it's a very early version, so it might be, but it would be like something like Java. Java has been dying for 35 years now. So it's been 35 years since I heard people say, oh, Java is going to die. And every year I see more people using Java. So this is like, one day all languages will be overcome by something better. And then you don't need to do this, but eventually you're going to need to, reinvent and learn things. Again, Rust is something that's coming up together. So I think it's really worthy to learn. That's why I really like the question.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Rust, and I don't want to advertise, but I do have some Rust sessions that I did earlier, so like earlier in the year. So, so there you go, Lucas. You can watch me teach you Rust later on.
Definitely.
Cool. So if there's not any more questions, really appreciate everybody joining us. Like I said, all the links, and I'll put the links to the other sessions in that that central location on the community side. But yeah, let us know, if you have trouble building anything or recreating anything. But hopefully this gives you a better understanding of where you can take your projects with TypeScript and actually getting them started there. Let me go ahead and one last ad I have for you. Where are you? I need to go all the way. Oh, this is too slow. Yeah, last one. So the last part of our series is actually going to deploy this project. So it's all fun and games, operating a local host. But let's actually get this out there. So on March 9th, 5:30 CET, I'll have another streaming session specifically about deploying React and TypeScript apps for using Azure Static Web Apps. So this is going to actually get this application out there. We'll walk you through the steps and deploy this project so you can show all your friends that you know the exact Stockholm train times. And if you're not located in Stockholm, well, it's still useful information maybe if you ever come and visit. So thanks everyone for joining us. And thank you, Lucas, for all your beautiful Node knowledge and TypeScript knowledge and sharing it throughout this.
Thanks a lot, Korey. Thanks a lot for calling me. I really want to be able to do this more. So if you want, just go out, send Korey a lot of messages, lots of messages. Hey, I want Lucas to show some things, and I really like to do this, and it will be very amazing.
Cool.
So nice.
Bye, everyone.
See ya, people.